Welcome to Data versus Commerce, where we explore the messy middle between database and doorstep. I'm Matt Johnson.
And I'm Floyd Blaikie. Let's dig in.
Hey guys, welcome back to Data versus Commerce. I'm Matt Johnson, and today we're talking about something that could potentially sound like just more AI noise, but I want you to hang with us because what we're going to talk about is the current reality in retail commerce. And it might actually be the difference between thriving and falling behind fast. So, the context for today's discussion is the report that we recently published. And we called it When the Shopper is a Machine. And it tells this story of what we're seeing in retail today. Not what they're saying they're doing, but what they're actually doing, who they're hiring, what they're building, and what's keeping them up at night. So to break this down, who better than our head of retail, Dan Ornstein? And Dan, I knew you'd be back on the show soon, and I couldn't be happier. So Dan, welcome back to Data versus Commerce. For those who might have missed your first episode that you did with us, and if you did, go back and listen to that one. It was great. We talked about AI search. But Dan, give the listeners just a quick intro, who you are, what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here. First time was so much fun. Had to come back. Always a good discussion with yourself and Floyd, who unfortunately can't make it today. But my role at Pivotree is really one where I guess is the head of our industry for retail, which is our biggest segment. Vast majority of our revenues come from work that we do with retail customers across the globe, really. We serve major retailers in Europe, North America, and Asia. It, on the one hand, is about excellent customer service for the services that we do provide and making sure that our clients are happy with the services they're getting. But on the other, they really look to us and me to help them figure out their strategy going forward around commerce. What are the major trends? How do they drive revenue through those channels and expand those channels? What do they need to watch out for in terms of whether it's customer expectations on their end as shoppers go about their business of trying to figure out what to buy from whom, or technology changes that we see that are inevitably disruptive in the commerce space, even given where this whole space came from in the beginning was the internet showing up and creating a whole new channel no one would have ever thought of before. And so obviously the topic of the day, as you mentioned, is AI when it comes to disruptive technologies in commerce. And the research that we did in Q2, in which we've started this process of producing a quarterly report on kind of the state of retail and what we're finding, was a bit of a surprise, I think, when you look at the stories and hype that has been out in the market around retail and brands going out and what they're doing on their commerce channels, to the brass tacks of now figuring out how do they make all those lofty objectives come to pass. And I'm sure as we get into it, what I'm alluding to is going to come pretty clear pretty fast.
Yep. It will, and there's so much to cover. And we typically try to keep our segments, our shows here around 20, 30 minutes at the most. That's way too short of a time to really dig in to all that we put together in this report. So we will post a link to this in the comments section if you're seeing this on a social network, or if you're on our website, dataversuscommerce.com. You'll be able to access that resource there. But Dan, let me start by just asking my first question. And this was really what surprised me, I think, the most in this report. So we tracked over 1,600 different retailers in North America from April to June. And 1 in 5 of those retailers posted a product data role, right? And that's far and above any other category of employee growth. And more than AI roles, more than commerce platform roles, developers. This feels like a story that tells us a little something about where commerce operations are heading. What is your take on the growth in product manager roles?
I think what it tells us is that the smart retailers know where they have a bottleneck. While everybody's kind of assuming that the next big roles will be AI hires and things that are all about creating agents of some sort, that work is kind of handled by engineering teams, kind of learning what's new and then taking care of it. So I don't think we quite see that level of hiring except at senior levels. But what it really tends to shine a light on is the biggest constraint in making any of that work, which is all about data, right? AI engines and LLMs and all of these tools that are out there, they are massive consumers of information, i.e., the data underlying that. And if your data is not up to date, not real time, not accurate, and not accessible through the integrations that it needs to go and find your information, you can achieve nothing with AI. And so these agents that we see retailers bringing to market, whether it's Kroger's intelligence helper that helps you put together meal plans and meals and fills your shopping cart, just think about what it's looking for to do that for you. If you say, I want a primarily vegetarian weekly budget and 10 recipes, that's all data that it's going to go through. And so it needs to know what products you're selling, what the inventory availability of that is in my local store, pricing, if you give it a price constraint, you want to stay within a certain budget, delivery information, etc. And all of that comes back to data. And so it's not that surprising that retailers are finding that they have to add to those teams that manage that core information, all of the appropriate attributes and expanded new attributes that the LLMs are looking for, well beyond what the typical ones that used to be there for SEO in e-commerce.
I would really be interested to learn more about because obviously good enough is no longer good enough, right? And that's my takeaway, right? Like it's not as if this isn't B2B commerce, kind of the world I live in, where you're just worried about the basics, right? Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You just are
Yeah.
trying to survive, right? You need food and shelter. In retail, we're looking at how do we go from good to great. So, can you talk a little bit about what great data looks like? In other words, like what are these roles going to be focusing on? What is the work that they need to do today that they haven't done maybe historically?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that they haven't done it. I think it's the demands on it are higher as it relates to accuracy and recency, meaning up to date to the minute or less for that matter. And so these are people in teams that are focused on owning the specification. So the basic block that says this is a blue t-shirt of this size, that core taxonomy. But then it's everything else that helps the LLMs and human shoppers figure out if this is the product that I want. That's images, it's copy in terms of explaining descriptions about those products, pricing, and then the attributes that really separate it from other products in your catalog or the competition. They can be things like the fabric it's made of, its recyclability, its sustainability related information. Sourcing information can become important, not just in terms of tariffs, but in terms of where people want to make sure their product is coming from for any number of various reasons. And it even goes beyond just the core product information into what other teams manage as it relates to reviews and recommendations. The agents are looking for all of that stuff. What's kind of interesting about it at the end of the day, though, is all of those visuals and some of the information that we can consume as humans and that we forgive if there's an error, right? So if we're looking at a picture and we're looking for the gray version of something and it's mislabeled or whatever it might be, it's not really a problem. Humans oversee that and we forgive the error if it's a brand we want to buy from, and we'll figure out that blue also exists and we'll buy blue. An LLM doesn't care. If it's looking for gray and your system is, when your attribute list has it tagged wrong to blue, you don't have a gray shirt, it's not going to recommend you, it's not going to buy from you. Once we get there, you're toast. And you may never know, right? Because all of that's happening on a surface that is not your store surface. It's happening in ChatGPT, in Perplexity, in Gemini, in Copilot, in whatever I'm using. And I may never know, as the human giving that instruction to the agent, that it looked at this store to begin with, let alone skipped over it because it couldn't find the right information to confirm that, in fact, this is the product that Dan is looking for.
And that is really fascinating because there's a lot of people think AI in commerce and they're immediately thinking about the customer experience, the ability to put together that shopping list, tailor a fit for you or whatever. But what we're starting to see is that AI is actually being implemented more in the background of commerce operations than it is in the front end customer experience. And that makes a lot of sense to me because that's where all of your friction is internally. That's where your labor is. And besides which, I mean, not many brands are willing to put AI in front of their customers yet. The ones that are really market leading, and we talked about some of them, but Target, Walmart, Albertsons recently did this. Kohl's just today I saw an article about Kohl's doing it. But on the back end, what is happening there? Where are companies investing in AI in their commerce operations or data operations?
They're investing in a few places. One is trying to sort of gain an efficiency advantage, if you will, in terms of AI tools taking care of some of the work at the scale and pace that it needs to be done without having to create a gigantic team of people to do it, with humans in the loop, of course, to make sure that it works. But the ones who get it right are going to spend their time auditing their catalogs, fixing their taxonomy, reconciling pricing across channels, none of which is necessarily visible to anyone in the front end. But if you get it wrong, the front end AI experience is terrible. And if you're making a promise to the market, to the customer, about how an AI tool is going to help them do something, and that data that's feeding it is incorrect or inaccurate or out of date, then you're degrading the experience. And like anything, when it comes anything digital, trust is the key thing, right? Whether it's online banking, the standard e-commerce experience that we've all come to know and love, or now the evolving AI experience. If I'm working through your journey in this digital channel, in an AI-enabled digital channel, and something's not right, or you can't answer the prompt that I'm giving you, and I end up in a loop, I'm gone. I'm going to bail on it. And the danger is that I actually bail on you entirely. Not just that I default to some other way of doing it. I might actually say, hell with this, I'm going with your competitor because I'll just go to the site and do it. I was experimenting with you. So it's great if you build a nice storefront, but if it's on top of the same cracked foundation that you have today, where those integrations behind the scenes that bring up price, availability, like specific SKU availability, whether it's online or in store, or how soon can I get it to you, any of that information that informs whether or not an LLM would recommend your product in your store to the consumer. If you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to transact at scale or at all through your AI layer.
It's crazy. The stakes are really high, and we're in this transition mode where we understand the potential, but the smart retailers and smart distributors are understanding we need to ensure the foundation is solid, and we need to invest there first. Now, I'm going to change gears a little bit because one of the interesting sections in this report talked about the concept of the consolidation bill. And that's how you worded it. So, just as an example, right, we had massive mergers and acquisitions from Dick's and Foot Locker, Raro, and WK Kellogg. There's many. We can name more, but you called it the consolidation tax. So, can you walk us through what that means in the data layer? What's actually happening behind the scenes that most people don't realize? All of the messy work that goes on to make these acquisitions really work.
Sure. So based on a number of years of experience that I've had around post-merger integration and putting two companies together, the headline is always, this is going to be great because customers from both banners or brands or both companies can now work together. We can get synergies from a supplier perspective for various categories and inputs, and depending what kind of a company I am. But behind the scenes, that is all about data. Who are the suppliers from both companies? Where are the opportunities to gain purchasing scale across certain ones of those? Who is the customer? Are Matt and Dan both customers of both brands? Is it only Dan? Is it actually this Dan that is the customer across both companies? And we certainly don't want to confuse the customer with offerings from both brands that they can't execute in store or online. Loyalty programs come into this in a big way. How do you merge your loyalty program? Make sure that golden record of the customer is in fact the customer. All of these things come back to data. Am I selling the same product at a different price under my two different banners? Do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? All of this represents the data behind the scenes that needs to be sort of normalized, figured out to find the similarities, join them together, and potentially integrate the flow of that data across what we call the every product moves twice idea. The physical product might move from whatever DC to customer house, but the data that moves with that as well. And it takes a long time to actually achieve the synergies or the benefits, to use the English word instead of the M&A word, from a large scale integration post merger. And a lot of it is really hard work in process and technology and the functions to make sure that there is a consistent message to the customer. Brand identities may be maintained, but if there's any intention of creating a single customer experience across banners, how do you bring those systems and information and data together so that it is a unified experience that is frictionless for the customer? Because as soon as the customer encounters a problem, like, yeah, your Foot Locker loyalty card is going to work at Dick's Sporting Goods, except it doesn't when you go to point of sale the first time, right? Because really it hasn't been figured out yet. That becomes a real issue. And it's an issue even if you've managed to do it for 75% of the loyalty base, but you didn't do it for the other 25% and they're still having a problem. It has to work for everyone out of the gate. Otherwise, it can't be something you announce. So there's a big tax that comes with mergers that you typically see on the quarterly reports for those that are public when they're doing it in terms of the integration costs. And they are a big capital investment that has to go on to really get the benefit from that. And along the way, strategically and separate from any of what we're talking about, you got to make sure not to destroy the brand value you just tried to acquire as well. So no easy task for the teams that are involved. Usually a lot of time pressure to get it done as fast as possible. And there are ways that we're seeing in the way we deliver work that enabling a technical delivery with AI tooling can help accelerate that, but it can only work at the speed of the people who are doing the work as well. So there is definitely a tax that hangs over an organization for a couple of years, especially when they're really large.
I see this all the time in distribution, and there's just a massive wave of consolidation happening across different industrial
Yeah.
segments. And it is difficult to say the least because it's as important as the brand experience is for retailers on the distributor side, it is the pain that happens on really the supply chain buy side of the business. The
Mm-hmm.
whole promise was that you were going to leverage your ability to move product faster and consolidate warehousing, and all of that gets lost in what does that actually represent in a database. So now you're building that from scratch almost, right? Like, so companies that have these mergers and acquisitions, it's not about, okay, now I've got two different operating systems and it's just a brand thing. It's way beyond that, right? It is the integration of those into a master system to have a record, both supply chain record as well as the product record. So you're basically starting over, aren't you?
In some ways you are, and you have to, like, one of the things that we found, and you and I work, have dealt with some of our customers going through these kinds of consolidations, especially on the distribution side, is unless you've got a real history of acquisitions and you've kind of figured this, in the industry it's called a playbook, you've figured out this playbook and what you're going to merge, what you're going to leave separate. And especially if you're smaller distributors coming together, they don't have the appetite for that kind of back office, back end integration across process teams and systems to really get the advantage. And you kind of tend to see the required investment becomes too high. And so they just leave it as different companies and they roll them up financially and they just operate as they always operated, but they become a financial roll up instead of a true integration where they could potentially get the benefits from sourcing or operational consolidation or other things to drive it, or it just takes a much longer than they originally intended. So they just don't have either the stomach for it or the investment required up front, because it's just generally really expensive to try to do it early, and so you end up doing it over time instead, which can work. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but I think there's a bit of a expectations management when it comes to what is the way we're going to do it, and now let's go do it. We're going to do it over 3 years or 2 years or 5 years, and then managing toward those timelines appropriately so that whoever the stakeholders are, public or private, they're along for that same ride. And you don't have a misalignment, because then you run into a lot of pressures and trouble and challenges.
I love that. And I think you are really answering at least part of, I think, my last question here as we turn the corner. Because for the people that are starting hearing themselves or hearing their businesses in this report and us talking about it right now, that we talked about the integration layer, the importance of managing that consolidation tax with good integrations, with data foundational work. They know that data is more critical than ever with all of the AI tooling and AI search that's happening. And my question always is this, right? Because you cannot boil the ocean. You cannot do everything. Nobody does it perfectly. I don't care if you're Amazon or Walmart, like nobody's doing this thing the everything the right way. But what is the next right thing that a retailer can do if they're in the situation where they know they're behind the ball when it comes to AI ready data? They know they're behind the ball when it comes to managing disparate systems and legacy systems. What are your tips for those listeners?
The tip that I would give our listeners would be run that assessment or audit before you do anything else. Pick your top 100 products, top 10 categories, however you define sort of the core of the business that you want to evaluate, that, and check whether the data that shows up in the different channels for those products is accurate and up to date and consistent, where a machine's going to read it. So if it's going to read it online in your store, that's one thing. Is it going to show up through the LLM models out there, the chat GPTs and perplexities of the world? Is it going to show up in a social channel? Make sure that it's up to date and accurate, and that it's consistent across those channels as well, right? So that you get an honest picture of where you actually stand, and then you know what kind of the size of the gap is, or whatever it is that you're going to need to, so you know what your gap is, you know where it is, and you can then prioritize fixing it so that you are in fact ready for this agentic future. We're seeing it already. We work with a number of retailers, and we've had this conversation with distributors as well, who really want to understand, are they showing up in these models? Like if they're seeing traffic rise, they're seeing visits rise and referred traffic rise from the AI platforms that are out there. The conversions are coming, but they're definitely seeing traffic rise. And in many ways, they're trying to understand how and why are they showing up? Like, why am I being recommended in this? And what prompts are leading somebody to recommend my store over someone else's store, so that they can then influence the models. And in order to influence the models, they're quickly finding that they have information gaps that they need to fill, whether it's pure product gaps, whether it's third-party sort of referrals and references that create the trust factor the LLMs are looking to evaluate, inventory information, not just yes-no availability, but very specific SKU level inventory availability information that's up to date, as well as return policies, other elements that kind of create the differentiation between brands. Everything may be completely right, but my return policy is either absent or is worse than my competitor. The LLM is going to drop me and go to the competitor, all else being equal. And so that audit tells you where you stand in terms of agentic readiness, which is what we call it. And we have a tool that can help companies figure this out relatively quickly, at least get a snapshot, and where the issue may lie. Is it in your product data source? Is it in your pricing source? Is it in your inventory or OMS? Is it just website content that's missing? That starts to pinpoint where to spend them on, where then to prioritize your efforts to fill those gaps.
I love that. You're absolutely right. I mean, the thing about it is we're data people, right? So use the data to determine the next right thing to fix the data. That seems logical to me. So where can folks get a hold of that assessment? Dan, is that something they have to email for, or can we drop a link?
It's something that they should probably go to the Pivotree website for and fill in kind of the contact request, and then we'll run it for them, and we can follow up with the report, etc. Doesn't take long.
Awesome. So, guys, you got the report. The Q2 retail report is live on the website. We'll link to that for sure. And if you're interested in Dan's agentic commerce assessment tool, that's going to be a lot of insight for, let's see, how much does that cost? $0?
to get a
Yeah.
good snapshot of where you're at. And then assuming, depending on whether the company wants some support and help to address those gaps is a different aspect to it. But it definitely provides a first pass across about a dozen dimensions that we've been talking about. Bit of a scoring as to whether you're poor, moderate, or advanced, which then highlights where you should tackle, what areas you should tackle first.
Love that. Love that. And then we'll help you get with a deep dive. Guys, this has been awesome. Dan, always a pleasure. I'm going to wrap up here and say that you'll be back soon for sure. Obviously, we're gonna do one of these every quarter. At the very least, you will get to hear from Dan Ornstein once a quarter as we go through these reports. I'm really excited about it. We of course did one for the state of industrial distribution as well. But just wrapping up, we did talk about something. It's not the sexiest subject, but it is the slow foundational work that makes sure that the product information is right in the way that your consumers are searching for your products today. And I would just say, again, check out the link in the comment section. Check out the link on the website, dataversuscommerce.com. You can go watch previous episodes there. One last thing I'll say is that Floyd and I will be back for the next episode, and we are starting to pick up some steam with this podcast. So if you are a listener and you haven't subscribed and you haven't dropped us a rating or review, please do that. That helps us tremendously as we start to reach out to more and more data commerce nerds just like you, me, and Dan. Guys, it's been a pleasure, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Data versus Commerce. New episodes drop weekly.
So if you're responsible for any part of how products get from a database to a doorstep, subscribe now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen.